Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the first of a 3-webinar series provided exclusively to Lifeboat resellers, partners, and end users. My name is David Leith. I'm the product manager for Uptime software and the Uptime product line. I'm very happy to have all of you here today to listen to my presentation talking about guidelines for unified IT, how to achieve better visibility of IT across all of your physical and virtual assets. Now, before I dive into the content, I want to take a few minutes just to do some housekeeping. First of all, this will be about a 30-minute presentation. We will have time for a Q&A at the end of the session, so please use the chat window, which is off to the right-hand side of your WebEx console, to ask any questions you have. You can ask them throughout the presentation or right at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question today, we'll do our best to actually respond to you directly via email. You also have the option of contacting us over Twitter using our @Uptime software handle if you care to ask questions using the Twitter interface. So today I'm going to be talking about guidelines for unified IT, and I want to cover 3 distinct topics. The first, I want to talk a little bit about what exactly is unified monitoring. It's one of those ambiguous terms, kind of like the cloud. So I want to talk a little bit about what Uptime software means when we talk about unified monitoring and why it's so important to the data center today. I also want to talk a little bit about what to look for in a unified tool, specific things that will add a lot of benefit to the business that you may not be immediately aware of. And then I'm going to talk about some best practices and basic migration tips to help you or your users move from a collection of individual tools or siloed tools to a more unified approach. So first off, this definition, what is unified monitoring? So in our eyes, the meaning of unified monitoring is the practice of monitoring, alerting, and reporting on servers, be them physical or virtual, applications, networks, and business IT services from one tool, providing a single set of dashboards across multiple data centers. So some key things here are really having that single tool that will give you a single set of dashboards covering all of the individual silos in your IT department or in your data center. Now, unified monitoring today, I'm sure you're aware, is a pretty common theme. There's a lot of different webcasts going on, a lot of different white papers coming out, and it's very, very popular now because we tend to find a lot of data centers that are falling into one of 3 buckets when it comes to simply monitoring their own environment, and I'm sure you're quite aware of these. The first level that I find users at when I talk to them is that they have potentially no monitoring in place, or just sort of one level above no monitoring, which is providing the basic level of monitoring which is required to kind of appease the IT gods and keep everyone happy, just to say that we have a checkbox beside, yes, we're monitoring our environment. It's a very, very hard place to be in, to have no monitoring in place in the modern day data center. The second monitoring approach that we find users in is what we call tool soup, and this is very common. I'm going to show you some numbers in the next slide. Many organizations have a handful or more than 10 individual monitoring tools in place, either allocated by silo, so maybe they have a tool for network monitoring, one for applications, one for servers, maybe technologies, so one for Windows, one for Linux, or even worse, maybe by areas of responsibilities, so somebody has a tool specific to their little slice of the data center or their application stack, and really has no visibility or no desire to know what's going on within the other applications or the other areas of the data center. And the third approach is this unified monitoring idea. So instead of having a tool soup or a collection of individual point tools, having a unified solution that will bring all monitoring, all visualization, status, and info into a single interface. Now, talking a little bit about that tool soup scenarios, this is where we find a lot of users, and I'm sure you talk to users daily or do yourself have a number of tools available in the data center to do your monitoring. There's a number of very common pitfalls when you're in this tool soup scenario. The first is integration headaches. So this is mostly a technical problem. So if I have several different tools, how do I get these tools to talk to each other? Very simply, how do I even recognize that there's an outage or some sort of alert in one of my tools and pass that information on to another tool, like a help desk or another monitoring solution? It can be very, very hard to deploy these tools, very hard to integrate them in a way that makes any sense to actually having a proactive IT operations process where you can react to problems before they cause end users issues. Another very common problem is just this idea of differing metrics. So between different tools, it becomes very difficult to do an apples-to-apples comparison across silos. So individual teams will have their own set of metrics that they trust and they are comfortable using, and they won't really pay attention or trust metrics coming from a different tool or someone else's toolkit. We also have troubles around inaccurate reports. I talked to a number of VPs of ITs or directors levels who really have a top-down view on their entire data center and their entire IT service, and they suffer from one major problem, and that problem is that they can't get a single report that will give them a version of the truth about the status of their data center. So maybe these people are even using a collection of different Excel spreadsheets to view performance data and availability information. It's simply not efficient, and it doesn't give you an accurate, clear picture of what's going on in the data center today. So for a director or VP level responsible for more than one silo of the IT organization, it can add to a lot of uncertainty to not be able to trust the reports that are coming to you across those different silos. Inherently, with a collection of different tools, there's also increased costs. So this isn't just the cost of maintaining different tools, but this is costs related to service outages and downtime and simple coordination around outages and reacting to problems in the environment, where you lose all of this time trying to piece everything together across different tools versus just having that single outage from a single tool so you can dive right down to the root cause of the problem and resolve the issue. And then the last one is one that you may or may not be aware of, is of course just different political issues, and I highlighted trust here. A key challenge when you're in this tool soup environment is just simply trusting each other's tools and being able to work around issues with everyone being very, very comfortable and very attached to their own siloed point tool and not necessarily trusting or wanting to move to a unified solution. That's a big part of this story, and it's really the non-technical side of a unified solution, is making sure that you're moving past all of these doubts and all of this fear associated with replacing tooling in the data center. I'll talk later in the presentation about some specific ways to overcome each of these individual pitfalls and specifically some of the trust issues. Now, why is unified monitoring so important? So it's definitely a buzzword right now. But there's a few numbers that I've gathered recently from a number of different analyst firms that really drive home why this is important in the data center. So the first number is that a conservative estimate pegs the cost of downtime at $42,000 per hour. That's an incredible amount of money associated with simple outages in the data center. So if you have an outage running for a few minutes, a few hours, every minute that it takes that application is down, that you could have responded more effectively and actually recovered it, is just lost money to either the organization, maybe it's a reputation cost and a trust cost for the actual IT department. If you can't recover your services in time, there's a very, very heavy financial and emotional and business impact to the cost of those outages. Now, some other numbers. So 41% of organizations are using 10 or more products to manage their IT performance. So clearly that scenario of tool soup, it's not just very common. It's almost the norm in the environment. So maybe you're in a situation where you have 2 or 3 tools. You're probably doing better than a lot of organizations, because we're talking nearly half of the organizations out there have 10 or more individual tools to manage their IT performance. It must just be a nightmare to maintain all those tools and to keep track of what's being monitored by which. Also, only 16% of organizations are able to proactively prevent performance issues in their environment. So these are organizations where they're able to anticipate warning signs in their environment, to get one step ahead of an outage so that they can actually recover and respond to performance issues before it actually impacts the end user. Only 16% of organizations are able to get to that level, that proactive level. The rest of them are stuck in a firefighting mode where they have to try to monitor, wait for an incident to happen, and then try to recover from it as quickly as possible instead of just avoiding that altogether. 63% of organizations reported the inability to correlate data collected from different sources. So these are organizations that fall into that spreadsheet problem or that multiple sources of data problem, where it's nearly impossible to take output, either metrics or status reports from different tools, and merge them together into something that can easily be correlated across different components of either the data center or the application stack, and make real decisions about how to resolve issues and streamline your IT operations. Now on the flip side, so these are all challenges in the data center, also we're able to find that organizations that have end-to-end application availability and visibility into application performance are 89% more likely to prevent incidents before their users notice. So those organizations that are able to build a unified monitoring framework that will cover all aspects of their IT service stack and their application stack are 89% more likely to be able to prevent problems before it ever impacts their end users or their business, and completely avoid that $42,000 per hour that those outages are costing them. So this is why unified monitoring is so important today, right? There's been a realization in the data center that having this collection of many different tools simply isn't cutting it today, and the costs are too large to ignore anymore. We need to move towards this unified solution. So what does this unified solution look like? Right. Well, the biggest thing I talked about around a unified solution like uptime is that you're able to produce a unified IT dashboard that will allow you to monitor, alert, and report on availability, performance, and capacity across all of your applications, be them database servers, web servers, but also your IT services. So thinking of these applications as pieces of a larger puzzle of actually delivering a real service to your end users. Monitoring all of your network devices and all of your servers, be them virtual, physical, or cloud servers. Taking all of that info that would traditionally be covered by potentially several different tools of different disciplines or different silos, removing all of those and building a unified solution where you can roll up all of that information to a high-level set of dashboards. And what many of these dashboards look like? Well, there's a lot of different things that you could potentially put into a high-level business dashboard. And here I've just included a few examples from uptime. In the upper left, we have a very high-level topology mapping. So this is a way to see across several data centers spread across North America what's the status in each of those data centers for critical applications. Are they up or down? And can I drill down from this view into each of those locations and find out immediately what the root cause of any problems are? Also, high-level capacity dashboards, so simply data center by data center. How much resource do I have and how much am I using? And then some more granular views specific to individual applications. The key here is that you want something that is highly flexible and can roll together all the different components of your application stack into this one dashboard or set of dashboards that everybody in the organization can look at and trust. So I'm going to move on now to what specifically to look for in a unified tool that may not jump out as immediately obvious. Right? So we already talked a little bit about kind of the scope of things you want to cover from a technology point of view, covering apps, network, virtual, physical servers, all rolled into one tool. I'm going to talk about 4 different things that will help add value to a unified framework and really deliver a better IT experience within your business. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is business service level views. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the depth of metrics that you actually need in a unified tool, some specifics around availability monitoring, and then some specifics around capacity management. So the first thing to look for is a business service level view. So this is the ability to take individual components spread across data centers or across technologies and monitor them individually, but then also roll all of those distinct components up into a true view of your application services and your business services, right? And doing so in flexible dashboards. You can see in the image on the upper right, what we're able to show is a series of high-level applications. So these aren't individual apps in the environment. These are real, true, high-level services that IT provides to the end user. So for example, in our email infrastructure, we can see that email infrastructure is made up of 5 different key components, and then one of those components is failing. From this view, I'd be able to understand that yes, email as a whole is down or the service is impacted in my environment. I could click on this image and drill down immediately to the exact component in that email infrastructure. So of course, email is a very complex beast spread across many different authentication servers, Windows servers, different messaging servers. All of those things need to be up and playing well together to provide a quality service to the end user. These application status or business level views tie together all of those pieces into the single version of application status and user experience for the end user. So being able to build these service level views in a flexible way, right? So being able to group them by those applications or by different technologies, different regions is very important. What you also want to keep in mind with these dashboards is that any dashboards in a unified tool should have this concept of being global and local. And what I mean by that is that we want these dashboards to not just be useful to IT. So certainly IT needs to know all the different applications at a very granular level, what's going on with these services in the environment. But we should be able to take those dashboards and also format them and show them to an end user. So why not have a NOC environment or a status page internally that end users can access to see immediately what the status of these critical applications is in your environment? So having a dashboarding system that's flexible, allows you to do global and local views, is very, very important to building an overall unified framework in your environment. The second thing to look for in a unified tool is really all around the depth of metrics, and this speaks a little bit more to some of the objections that commonly occur when users move from individual point tools to a more unified, broad monitoring solution. Everyone likes to stick to their very, very detailed metrics. So if you're an Oracle guy, you're probably going to want a tool that is very, very deep on Oracle, so you can get right down to every level of depth possible out of your Oracle application to understand any performance issues. But when you're applying a unified tool, you need to step back from the depth of metrics and really ask the question, what are the right metrics to help us make business and capacity decisions around these applications? So finding that right balance between very, very granular metrics and higher level metrics that are very actionable, right? So metrics from the Oracle server that you can use to determine if there's going to be a capacity problem, if there needs to be more resources applied there that will support future growth of the applications that run off of that server. You can find a balance where you're getting 80% or 90% of the total value of your metric set from a decision-making point of view without having to have a point tool there that would really only enable 10% of the deep dive diagnostics. Also, you want to look for a tool that is intelligent about collecting both virtual and physical metrics. And I've included a screenshot here to show you exactly what I mean. This screenshot shows, for a VM instance, a combination of CPU usage metrics from both the VM hypervisor point of view, but also the OS application internals to that VM guest. So what you can commonly see on a VM, just using CPU as an example, is that the CPU internally to the VM may think that it's 100% capped, when in reality, on the back end, according to the hypervisor, maybe it's only using 15 or 20 actual raw megahertz. Well, the raw megahertz aren't going to matter too much to the guest OS. The guest OS is going to behave as if it's 100% busy. It will start paging, deferring events, and overall performance of any applications running on that VM will be impacted. So you need a tool that will provide both the internal metrics right down to the process level of things running inside each VM, and then also couple that with the information that you get traditionally from your hypervisor, be it VMware, Hyper-V, or Citrix. You also want to look for a unified tool that has visibility into those key applications. So I talked about Oracle already, different database servers. Make sure that you've covered all the bases there, but also most importantly, make sure that the unified tool provides a user experience component, such as monitoring of the working of a website, so being able to actually browse through a website and simulate an end user experience, or perhaps test an email system, so send an email through an email system, validate that it actually gets to the recipient and it comes back out from that recipient and the times that it took along each stage of that. Having a unified tool that will provide that user experience will give you the high-level info you need at the absolute front end of the problem, which is the end user experience for these business services. Use that to help plan capacity and then trickle down those performance metrics to all the components that actually make up that application delivery. The third thing is all about availability monitoring. So of course, this is just simple looking for a tool that will do up-down monitoring. That's level one. What you really want to look for is a tool that provides monitoring across all of your different technologies, all of your different teams, and all of your different silos, and that provides you with a correlation and root cause across all of those things. So using our website example that I've spoken to a few times, a website is very, very complicated. You may have front-end servers, authentication servers, mid-tier servers, database servers, and then the virtualization stack that's actually hosting all of those pieces. You want to provide a monitoring tool that is able to look at all the different components that make up that application stack, and in the event of an outage, be able to instantly correlate where that outage is actually coming from, identify the root cause, and filter out different alerts and messages to ensure that the email messages coming to you as an end user, maybe it's a sysadmin, maybe it's a VP of IT, give you that information. They're able to tell you right away, this is where the source of the problem is. Here are the things that are also impacted by this problem and the severity of that issue in your environment. And most importantly, drive home why you need to go and fix this problem. And then the last aspect in availability monitoring that not a lot of tools offer is true self-healing. So we've talked about all of these sending of alerts and being able to monitor things that are going on in the environment. But what happens when there's an outage in the middle of the night and maybe you don't have operations staff available to deal with a problem? Wouldn't it be great if your unified monitoring tool could find the source of that issue and actually try to automatically resolve it? So maybe it means restarting a process on a server. Maybe it means rebooting a VM. Maybe it's more advanced and it's booting up additional resources or reallocating resources in a cluster to support application performance. Look for a unified tool that provides self-healing across all of those different technologies that make up your application stack. The last piece I want to talk about specifically for what to look for in a unified tool is capacity management. So of course, every unified tool should have some aspect of capacity management. And this is an area where there's a lot of room for interpretation on what's actually required, much like the differing metrics and the depth of metrics across different tools. What I always tell the users when it comes to capacity management is that very often the problem is overcomplicated versus being simplified to really get you the value that you're looking for. So for most organizations, capacity management is going to come down to three key questions. What do I have? What am I using? And most importantly, when will I run out? So again, to come back to the very beginning where we were talking about problems getting accurate reports and accurate information across tools. To a VP of IT using several different tools, it's almost impossible to answer this question, right? Or maybe they receive an Excel spreadsheet from several different teams and have to roll together all of the info just to answer these three things. How much capacity is there? How much am I using? And how much longer will that last? So you should be looking for a tool that will answer those questions for you. Because the reality is that most organizations can't answer these questions. And what that means is that they run into capacity problems that they could have predicted ahead of time and could have saved the user experience or avoided outages versus waiting for them to happen. The other aspect of capacity management that you should be looking for is what I call apples to apples. And specifically when you're getting into unified tools that cover the UNIX space, Uptime can cover Solaris as well as P-series boxes and HP boxes, coupling that information capacity-wise to standard x86 platforms or virtualization platforms. It's nearly impossible to do an apples-to-apples capacity comparison across those different technology stacks. So you should be looking for a tool that will allow you to report on capacity in a consistent unit of measure across all of those different architectures and all of those different silos within the environment. In Uptime, what we use is the concept of a power unit for CPU, which will tell you the raw number of power units available based on the real number of CPUs and megahertz on a target system. And you can run a single report that will show you the capacity for CPU across all of your different platforms in one report, show you the peak usage as well as the off-hours usage, and identify which systems are the most overloaded in your environment so that you can look at increasing capacity on those to avoid problems in the future. So those four big things to look for in a unified tool, besides the overall monitoring across different silos of the servers, physical, virtual applications, networks, also looking for four specific things: be it business service level views, the depth of the metrics to make sure that you can replace all of your point tools with a unified tool, availability monitoring that includes correlation across technology stacks as well as the ability to self-heal, and capacity management that lets you do an apples-to-apples comparison and answer those three key questions about capacity in your environment. A good unified tool like Uptime provides answers to all of these questions. So the last thing I want to talk about is basically guidelines to get to the next level. So how do we go from this scenario of being in a siloed environment with multiple point tools and actually getting to the unified world? There's two key pieces to this. The first migration tip that I can offer, speaking back to some of the political and trust issues that many organizations faced, is all about building that trust with stakeholders. And I can advise three different things to help do this. The first is that you should find a tool that will allow you to do concurrent monitoring side by side with your existing tools. So put into place a 3-month window or a 1-month window where you can monitor your entire environment using both the unified solution and the individual point solutions. And what that will allow you to do is start demonstrating accuracy of the unified solution when compared to the individual point solutions. So validate that the unified solution is providing all of the same outage information, the same capacity information as you're used to getting from your point tools. And once you have that information and prove that it's accurate, you can start moving towards actually proving that it's helping with the efficiency and improvement of IT service delivery. So maybe it's mean time to repair, number of outages, tracking against your SLAs. Your tool should have the pieces in place that will allow you to track those key IT service delivery metrics and compare those over time to show whether you're actually getting better at delivering these services or not. The second piece around migrating from silo to unified monitoring is all about making deployments easier. So one of the key objections when users are faced with this unified dilemma is, how do I do this quickly? How do I replace all these tools, get up and running with something new, and not have it take a year or two to actually roll out, or worse, actually never roll out, like a framework tool? There's three things that will help that you should look for. The first is a tool that will help you port existing configurations. So if you have different configuration info in your siloed tools or your point tools, can you port that information via API or script into the new unified solution? Does the new unified solution have the ability to do auto-discovery and discover your environment automatically, dramatically reducing the ramp-up time? A great example of a user I worked with recently was able to use Uptime to scan their entire virtual environment and add 8,000 VMs and servers to Uptime in 15 minutes. So that's an incredible adoption rate to be able to roll out a new tool. Also, the ability to import custom scripts. So if you do have custom scripts for custom applications in place, make sure that the tool you're moving to can actually take those scripts and reuse them. So use them in a framework, modularized way, where you don't have to redo a lot of that work or the time invested in your custom scripts. Also on the deployment side, it becomes very important to compare the total setup overhead, including licensing, services, training, and maintenance. There's a lot of different tools in the monitoring space, and a lot of them that claim to do different parts of the environment, claim to be easy, claim to save money over time. But you need to really look closely at specifically things like the licensing model. Is there a licensing model in place where maybe the tool seems cheap up front, but a year from now you're going to find out you need to add several different modules or update your licensing to cover different portions of your environment that you didn't anticipate needing before? You should look for a tool that gives you one flat rate per platform that is easy to understand, and the licensing will support your long-term growth without needing to pay for all kinds of additional modules or different tools. Also, services, training, and maintenance. How much time do you really need to spend rolling out this tool? Do you need professional services to do it? With uptime, you don't. Right? On the maintenance side, how many administrators is it going to take to maintain this unified platform versus maintaining all the individual point tools? Usually the answer is that it's much easier to maintain that single unified solution than trying to have different teams of specialists managing all of their individual tools. And then, of course, training. Is this an easy-to-use tool? Is training required? Do you need specialists to actually understand how to use the tool? Or is the tool logical enough that it will make deployment and maintenance long-term very easy? Those are all things that you should be looking at to help make your deployments easier. So I'd like to wrap up with a quick Q&A. I see a few questions coming in. So if you would like to ask questions, please take a moment to think about it and enter them in the chat window on the right. I have just sort of scrolling through the questions here. I have one question: does Uptime do capacity modeling? That's actually a great question. So Uptime doesn't do capacity modeling out of the gate, but what it does do is help you analyze previous trends so you can anticipate where those trends are going in the future. Right? And again, coming back to those three key questions, simply how much capacity do I have, how much am I using, and when am I going to run out? Answering those questions will add a tremendous amount of value and give you the most bang for buck without needing to worry about going to a true capacity modeling forecasting solution, which frankly may end up costing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. You don't need to do that. In most cases, you can move IT forward just by answering those three basic questions. Another question that came up, does Uptime require agents? That's also a very good question. So you should be looking for a tool that provides an easy way to roll out monitoring in your environment. So Uptime provides a series of different agentless options, so where there's APIs available or SSH, WMI connections into platforms, Uptime can utilize that. We do also offer a lightweight agent that can be deployed on different servers. And the benefit of these agents is that they really enable the automation and self-healing power that you just can't get through agentless solutions. So the lightweight agent allows you to more easily restart services, run complex recovery scripts, and trigger multiple actions on the target host. All right, the third question. We have different teams for each silo, each of them using their own tool. How do I start the conversation about moving to a unified platform? How I would start that conversation, particularly with management, is to come back to some of those metrics that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And this presentation will be made available. A link to it will be sent to you as an attendee so you can review it. Come back to that $42,000 per hour for the cost of outages. Come back to the number of organizations that have challenges correlating outage information across different siloed tools. When you can talk about unified monitoring in terms of dollars and cents impact to IT or to the business in general, that definitely sheds light on the issue and helps reprioritize the issue overall with management and really kickstarts the conversation. And ideally, when you do move to that unified tool, you find a tool that's easy enough that allows you to test out the setup and really prove those results. So prove that you're able to avoid outages, you're able to recover services more quickly in your environment. All right. I see a few other questions, but we've hit the end of our time window, so I will respond to those questions individually. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. If you do have other questions or you'd like to check out more about Uptime, you can go to www.uptimesoftware.com, try the evaluation, or contact me directly, David Leith at Uptime Software, or our sales team at sales@uptimesoftware.com. And yes, this presentation will be provided online. Links to both the slide deck as well as the recorded session will be sent to you in about 2 days after the presentation. Thank you, everybody, and take care.